All right, welcome back everybody to another Stogie Lads interview episode. Today we had the honor of having a really big name within the cigar industry here and the cigar media industry, I guess you can say as well, join us to exchange some words. None other than Aaron Sigmond.
Yeah, he's a huge one of the big personalities in the cigar industry. He's actually just about to reach 30 years in the industry. For you that might not know him, really, he kind of started out by founding Smoke magazine, which was actually the second cigar glossy, as they call it. So after Cigar Aficionado, it was the second one ever back in the 90s, way before our time. He created the Cigar Report for Double Down Media, which was also a cigar lifestyle periodical. And he was an advisor, editor continually for Playboy, kind of a big deal magazine if you haven't heard about it as well. His good time collaborating with Playboy led to his first ever luxury book, of which he has several now. But that was the Playboy Book of Cigars, which is pretty famous one.
Yeah, definitely a big one. And 25 years after creating Smoke magazine and a decade after the first edition of the Playboy cigar book, Sigmond released the second cigar title, which was the big one. This was the Impossible Collection of Cigars, which was released in two editions. But from New York anyway, and Paris-based luxury publishing house Asulin. So in 2022, Asulin will publish Sigmund's next two cigar-related books, which he did not disclose enough in the interview.
But that will come. And obviously, other than this, specific print media that he's done, he's been an advisor to major brands. I know he's worked with Davidoff. I know he's worked with General Cigar Company. Those are obviously also really big ones. Nat Sherman as well, those of you guys that know, and Arturo Fuente. So it's a lot of that stuff. He's close connections with a lot of celebrities in the cigar world. He has some incredible experiences from that side of the world as well. And obviously he's been in the industry for so long, like we mentioned, that there's a wealth of knowledge and cool stories. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of fun stuff for you guys in this episode. Tune in and we will cut to that interview now. All right, guys. We have the absolute pleasure to welcome I'll say an icon in the cigar industry, Mr. Aaron Sigmond. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to call you CW. I like that.
Yeah, please do.
It's a good one. It's good initials. I don't have good initials, which is why I do the SIG thing, but CW is a good one.
Yeah. I go by CW in Sweden.
The energy just got sucked out of the room. I've never had actually dead air go so quickly on one of my interviews. But there's always a record to be broken, I suppose.
No, our spirits are high. I just need to. I mean, we're not smoking cigars indoors in Sweden. It's tough, but I'm meeting you halfway with the cigar malt, at least.
Nice. Yeah, I actually when I still drank a lot of Scotch, which I don't these days. The Dalmore cigar malt was one of my favorites, as a matter of fact. Not just because it was cigar, it paired well with cigars. I happen to enjoy that particular spirit. Now I'm more into wines. I drink a lot of wine. I'm a wino, but kind of, a fancy one. I wish I was like the Ripple or the Thunderbird or something, but it just doesn't happen. All right, guys, you invited me on here. You have questions. I perhaps have answers. Let's get to it, shall we?
Let's
Ruben, you've got to stop. You're monopolizing the conversation. I can't stand it.
I mean, I'm going to stop hijacking it. I'll give you the floor. Let's start right off because we obviously have looked into a bit and know some of the things that you've done. But starting right off with your time at the Davidoff in Beverly Hills, tell us a bit about that time in your life as like a young guy in a big city.
I did think the body cavity search before the interview was a little bit extreme, by the way, just to let you know. For further guests, I mean, some people pay for that, but it just seemed a little hardcore for me. So yeah, we're starting way at the very beginning. So in the very early '90s, I finished undergraduate at university, and I didn't know. I knew I wanted to be a writer of some sort, but I was kind of deciding what I wanted to do. I actually went to grad school for screenwriting, and while I was doing that, my father came to me and said, "You've been on the payroll for a very, very, very long time, and you've done quite well for yourself. You need to go earn some of your own money." He's like, "Your mother and I aren't abandoning you, but we're kind of abandoning you." And I said, "I totally understand." And I was very fortunate, as you know, here university is very expensive in the United States, and I graduated my undergraduate degree debt-free and with a car fully paid for. So my parents definitely, did everything they could to kind of push me on that road. And a buddy of mine at that time was the general manager of the Davidoff in Geneva store, and almost simultaneously, whose name is Amer Al-Kabasi. And Amer, basically the same time my father said that exact same thing. He's like, "You're hanging out here too much. Either I'm giving you a job or you have to hang out here less." I'm like, "Well, that's perfect, because I actually need a job, according to my father." And that is how it all came to be. I started going to university in '84. I went to school for not quite a full year in England in '85. That's where I met Edward Sahakian at Davidoff of London. Wow. And so I've known Edward Sr. since 1985, and he was my mentor on Cuban cigars. And then essentially Amer leaves Davidoff not that long after I did. I think he was planning his exit with hiring me originally as assistant and then eventually general manager. And so without exaggeration, 7-8 years later, after I had met Edward, I was running my own Davidoff shop. And that shop was very unique for a number of different reasons. The first being that it only carried Davidoff and Zeno products. So it was Davidoff, Avo, Zeno, Griffin, private stock. It was only Davidoff's actual core lines, which was interesting. We did sell Esti Dupont accessories, but mostly it was Davidoff accessories. The other thing that made it unique is there was a private club directly above the boutique that had a lot of celebrity clients, and that was called the Keep. And it was the first Davidoff store in the world to kind of have this model. So it was 2 stories. On the bottom you had, and that's when we also so Cool Water back then was still Davidoff Cool Water. Right. So we had the fragrance right near the door, or we get too stinky. We like the cigars better. And so you had fragrance, you had humidors, and back then, actually, the Davidoff cosmetics line, all the Cool Water, there were moisturizers and deodorants and whatnot. So we actually sold all that in one little front corner of the store. And then that store actually had a huge pipe selection, which is odd. Oh, wow. I don't believe in the 2.5 years I was there, we ever once sold a pipe. But I gifted myself a pipe to encourage to smoke it in the store, to encourage people to smoke a pipe. And then people would always ask me, like, can I say bad words on the show? It's discouraged.
Oh God, of course.
That people would be like, "What, Sig? Why the fuck are you smoking a pipe? Why don't you go get a cigar?" So I was like, wow. Yeah, there's no winning for Liz. We were not a pipe store, but we sold it. Every once in a while, we'd have a European tourist who would come in and ask us for the Davidoff pipe tobaccos, which I don't even think are imported to the United States anymore, but they were obviously then. So, so Davidoff was an amazing experience. I mean, we had literally a who's who of Hollywood clientele come in and out, and this was their little oasis. And funny enough, that store is where I met Pierce Brosnan, which is, and became chummy with him. And that's why Pierce appeared on the first cover of Smoke magazine. So it all became very serendipitous. It all fell together very quickly.
Yeah, we got a lot to unravel. I actually just wanted to take a tiny detour because there's so much stuff there. I mean, the Keep, all that stuff. But this is a question we get so often because, especially here in Sweden, people look at us, our age, and they just think, well, what are these guys nuts? Like, why are they smoking cigars? And it sounds like you smoked cigars when you were really young, right? If you were already at university. Do you remember your first cigar? Like, how did you get into it? What was that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I was about 5 No, I wasn't that loud.
Four.
So
Jose
my
Blanco
father-
was like 5, so I wouldn't have been surprised.
Everybody says that. Carlito Fuentes says that, it's his was really, really young. And I'm sure in that household, it's probably very, very true. In my household, my dad was, and I write about my dad a fair amount in my books and some of my articles. He was what I would call a social cigar smoker. So weddings, anniversary parties. He loved to smoke in his car. He collected a particular model of car, and often they were convertibles. So he would smoke in the car quite often. But he had what is called a Wooten desk, or sometimes it's called a Wells Fargo desk. It's an American antique desk. And he had 2 of the drawers converted to a humidor. He had them lined in cedar and little humidification devices put in them. And so every once in a while I was probably about 16. I don't even think I was 17 yet. Oh. So about 16, I would start stealing cigars out of the humidor because it was really well stocked. He wasn't smoking that. And my dad really only smoked 2 cigars with a regular basis. One was the Dunhill Monte Cruz, which was the Canary Island cigar that the Menendez family made not immediately, but soon after leaving Cuba and leaving Monte Cristo behind. And the Monte Cruz packaging was very similar to the Cuban Monte Cristo, which is only fair because it was theirs. And then he also did the vintage Macanudos. Macanudos were such a huge brand in the 70s and the 80s, really up until really the the early 90s. Macanudo was still the king of the hill. And so, I don't honestly, I hate to say, I'm pretty sure it was Macanudo vintage, which was kind of their top of the line at that time. But I don't ever recall if it was a Monte Cruz or a Macanudo, but it would have been one of those. And I didn't smoke a whole lot of cigars. I mean, I would smoke now and again, and right up until, I guess, towards the end of college. By the end of college, I was smoking a fair amount. And then by the time I was at the Davidoff store and I was in grad school, I was smoking every day. So there you go. And clearly it did not stump my growth. So that's probably a myth. Yeah, exactly. Good. So I mean, I think like a lot of people, it was very in vogue then. It was still a thing. The boom in the United States was not a boom then. It was kind of this embryonic percolation, I guess, for lack of a better description. But like so many people, I wanted to look older and be taken more seriously. That's when I first grew a beard, and the beard was jet black, and now it's mostly white. And I smoke cigars to look older, and now I only wish to look younger. So it is an interesting paradox how it all you get your wish eventually. So that's it. So I started smoking, I would say, 16, 17, but in earnest. Well, let's figure it out. So I was probably 19 when I started traveling to London to see Edward. So I'd say by 19, I was really getting into it. And I always talk about Edward when I do these shows, because this is a man who was so this is a guy who sold cigars to princes and sheikhs and dukes and earls. And, here's this kid who's on a student budget coming in, not unlike yourselves, who's coming into the Davidoff store with 60 pounds in his pocket to spend on cigars. And Edward was just infinitely patient. He'd say, you need to try this, you need to try that. And at the end, we both knew I would only be buying a 5-pack of Davidoff number 2s. Now, hindsight being 2020, I should have pocketed the number 2s and smoked everything he gave me. But of course, I just smoked them at will. And of course, what was his name? His last name was Smith, so that's easy enough to remember. Maybe it'll come to me. But there was a humidor manager at the German Street Dunhill at that time who was also not as kind as Edward, but he was very, very nice. And he would always slip me a couple of the then Cuban Dunhills as well. So I started out well. Like I started out smoking the best that was available in America, and by the time I got to London, I mean, I'm smoking Dunhills and Davidoffs. It was an auspicious start, to be completely candid with you. I was very jaded forever. Actually, I just think I'm jaded now, right this very moment. I am going to turn on, it's getting darker and I can kind of see myself I'm going to hear you and this is basically radio, so that's fine. But I'm going to go turn on a light. So give me a second here.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
All right. You guys ask, and we'll keep it going.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you were talking a bit about the when you started Smoke Magazine and well, the cigar boom, however you described it. What was it like? Like, what drove you to start Smoke Magazine? It was the second cigar magazine on the market at the time when you started.
So, so it was the second cigar market, glossy, as we call them, because it was fancy paper and big celebrities. So Cigar Aficionado is actually the second magazine on cigars, which makes Smoke the third. But Cigar Aficionado was the first glossy. So it just depends on how you want to look at it. So while I was at Davidoff at Geneva, so I'll back up. My father was a wine collector, more than he was a cigar guy, and also a cognac collector. So he had like a charter subscription to Wine Spectator. And what a lot of people have forgotten is that Cigar Aficionado actually started out as a special 16-page insert. Maybe it was 32 pages, but it was a special insert inside an issue of Wine Spectator. Predicated on the success of that, they turned it into a magazine, and the rest, as they say, is history. My father sent me in the mail that issue of Wine Spectator and said, you should read this, because I was at Davidoff at the time. And then Cigar Aficionado came out, and I read it like most people back then who were interested in cigars rather voraciously. But what I really came to realize, I was, relatively speaking, right around your guys' age when I was at Davidoff. I was 23, I guess, when I started, 22 or 23, 23. So, what I realized quite quickly is Cigar Aficionado was wonderful for my father, but it wasn't really speaking to me in a lot of different ways. The cigar parts did, but the lifestyle stuff didn't. And I started thinking, I had been on my university, my secondary school, and my, what we call middle school or junior high school here. I'd been on all my newspapers, and I was going to grad school to be a screenwriter. So I always knew I'd do something in writing. And in my spare time, when I wasn't at school and I wasn't at Davidoff, I started writing the business plan for Smoke Magazine, and that was it. And I found investors, and I moved to New York, which was then and remains the hub of kind of branded media. Chicago used to hold part of that title, and now, with the World Wide Web, it's everywhere. But New York is still the hub of print, and then of course Los Angeles, Hollywood is the hub of video and film. So I wrote. No, go ahead, please.
I was just gonna ask, because you did sort of touch on it, but it is kind of an awesome story, the way the first cover came around, because that is kind of connected to the Keep, right? Which I wanted to ask a little more about, because some cool stuff go on there. And
we got all the time in the world until I'm done with this cigar. So there were many celebrities that patronized and probably patronized, but in this case patronized the Davidoff store on Rodeo Drive. So you also have to remember something about Beverly Hills then. It was only rivaled by New York and the number of cigar stores it had. But what was interesting about Beverly Hills was Beverly Hills, downtown Beverly Hills, that you think of, that you like see in Pretty Women and whatnot, is very, very small. It's trying to think, it's like 4 blocks by 3 or something like. It's not huge. And so there was a flagship Dunhill store, there was a flagship Davidoff store, there was the little cigar store that Pete Johnson ran underneath the Grand Havana Room. Then there was the Grand Havana Room. Then there was Nazareth. Then there was Kramer's. At one point in time, there was the guy from Canada, Thomas Hines had a place. This guy Phil Danes had a place. So you had all these cigar stores, but the ones that kind of got the celebrities, Old Hollywood had a tendency to patronize the Dunhill store, because that's what they knew, and it had been there since the 50s. It moved locations a couple of times, but they'd had a presence in Beverly Hills since the 50s. Stallone and Schwarzenegger usually hung out at Nazareth. Schwarzenegger, who actually wrote a blurb for the back of the Playboy book of cigars, would come into our store. So I've known Governor Schwarzenegger, Arnold, for a long, long time now. And then, and I'm not usually name dropping, but this is the topic we're on.
Well,
We
I
want
you to
that.
be.
Stallone, okay. Stallone,
Yeah.
I actually met in London with Edward, and there's a famous within my little circle, photo of the three of us thumbing through an issue of Smoke Magazine, which is great.
Oh,
but
nice.
I never met him in Beverly Hills. But our regular clientele was Johnny Depp, Whoopi Goldberg, Joe Pesci, the late Gregory Hine, who was the nicest human being in the world. God bless him. Tom Selleck was a huge client of ours.
Right.
On and on and on. But Pierce Brosnan was perhaps our biggest regular out of all the celebrities.
Okay.
So right across it's not really a street, but it's like a little walkway from us is a very famous hair salon, or was, sort of no longer there, called Jose Bear. And he was like the celebrity hairstylist. And Pierce used to get his hair, I don't know, like cut every week, it seems like. It never grew. It was always the same. And he would basically go get his hair styled or trimmed or whatever. And then he would come up over, he would buy a cigar or two, and he'd go up to the Keep. And he never liked to smoke alone. And when he was there, it was kind of, it was like people had real jobs. They weren't all just movie stars and TV stars. So I would often go up there and keep him company, and we would chat a whole lot. And when I was starting smoke, and I love telling this story because it just shows you how unbelievably naive I was. So I'm in New York. I'm living in New York, and of course I had all my clients' home numbers and mobile numbers, and so I called Pierce and I said, you're going to be James Bond, and I started this new magazine. It's going to come. It's going to come up. Oh no, I like Pierce as Bond. So Timothy Dalton's really my only kind of
No, of course, yeah.
So so I said, you're going to be Bond, and I'm starting this magazine, and we're mates, and you need to be on the cover of my magazine. He just starts laughing. He's like, you're such a fucking idiot. It's like, that's just not the way it works. He's like, I got studios, I got producers, I got international presence. He's like, but you are a friend, and we will work something out. So he introduces me to this guy who is truly a Hollywood legend, this guy by the name of Dick Gutman. And he was a press agent before there were publicists. They were quote unquote press agents. And Dick said, Pierce said, you would be calling. We're going to be doing a photo shoot for Vanity Fair with Firuz Fazad, who's a very, very, very famous photographer. And if you pay Firuz a couple extra bucks on the side, we're going to shoot some stuff of Pierce with a cigar after we're done with the Vanity Fair shoot. And you're only quote unquote supposed to use those for the interior of the magazine. What you do with them is completely your own business.
Nice.
Pierce Brosnan appeared on only 4 covers in the United States when he was Bond, or 5, because Smoke Magazine was the 5th. It was a completely original shoot. So Pierce totally bucked me out. He was an absolute incredible guy. Lived up. We did an interview at one of Wolfgang Puck's restaurants, the one that was, I don't think it's still there anymore. It was called Grenada. It was in Malibu. It may still be there. It was terrible decor. It basically looked like if you took the entire set of a live action Little Mermaid and you lit it to dynamite and it exploded, that was the interior of that restaurant. It was just gaslit. But we hung out, we smoked cigars outside, and we were there with another one of the editors, and we had a great time. And that, that's how you never know how it's all going to build. And what I've said so many times, time and time again, is the people that I've met through and because of cigars is truly just, it's unparalleled. It's remarkable. Presidents, CEOs, movie stars, TV stars, famous winemakers, famous chefs. It's unbelievable. And it's all because of this. So it's pretty amazing. Beautiful. So while I'm at, we'll keep this somewhat linear for the listeners who have already dropped off by the dozen.
No way.
You to assume that there are dozens of listeners.
Right. So for the 5 we started with, we're down to 2. For those 2, we'll do a little recap to bring you up to some sort of linear level, or chronological at least. Hold on one second. I need a little.
Of course.
sip of something. So I meet Edward Sahakian, learn a lot about Cuban cigars, come back to the States, go to graduate school, start working at Davidoff. While I'm at Davidoff, I write the business plan for Smoke Magazine. I launch Smoke Magazine. Pierce Brosnan, then 007, now just retired and happy in Hawaii, or semi-retired. I mean, you're a movie star forever, I guess. So that's good. And then, I did Smoke for a whole lot of years. And then there was a lesser known sequel to Smoke Magazine called Drink. I could only deal with monosyllabic titles at that point. So, and we did toy with a magazine called Eat. But it never got off the planning stages. So we did Smoke, and then I retained part of my equity, but I left Smoke, and eventually I gave up that equity. So, I mean, I did give it up. They bought me out. So then I was doing Drink Magazine with another set of partners. And all in all, that, between Smoke and Drink, that's like 6 or 7 years of my life. So it's a good long time.
And this is all through the cigar boom, right? Like in the 90s.
Oh, yes. That was the other thing you guys asked about, the cigar boom. So Zeno took so much of what he knew, even when Dr. Schneider bought the company from him, from the wine industry. So obviously you have a Grand Cru, and then you have a second wine, right? Most big wine houses in France have a second wine. And in essence, that's what you had. You had the Davidoff white label, which had a line called, and still does, called the Grand Cru. But that was their flagship. And then they created this secondary line, which was the Zeno Mouton Cadet. And there were other Zenos that followed. There was the Zeno Connoisseur. They made 2 machine-made cigars, one in Java, one in Sumatra. There were all sorts of stuff, but the Mouton Cadet was the first. So the Mouton Cadet comes along, and that starts it going. And then Davidoff opens very shortly thereafter, opens up its first flagship store in New York on Madison Avenue, and that's run by a guy by the name of George Brightman, who is friends with Jose Blanco, who was on the show and is a lifelong friend of mine, and is one of the people that actually the Impossible Collection of Cigars is dedicated to, as well as Edward Sahakian Sr. So George is the general manager. Marvin Shankin was actually one of his best customers. And the ideas of Cigar Aficionado started percolating in that very store. So it would be difficult to argue the importance of Davidoff's presence in, and the fact of the matter is Dunhill was losing their panache. They were losing their je ne sais quoi. They were just changing, and they kind of grown lazy, quite honestly. They just weren't being very ambitious in the US, even though they had many, many more stores. Back then, Dunhill had stores in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Beverly Hills, Texas as well. So, you had the Mouton Cadet launch, which was a big deal here in the US. You had the opening of the Davidoff Geneva store on Madison Avenue in New York City. And then you had the launch of Cigar Aficionado, first in the pages of Wine Spectator, and then as a standalone publication. Those are all the contributing factors, as I know them, that really started to perpetuate the cigar boom. How does anyone really describe a zeitgeist and explain all the cultural movement things going on? At that exact same moment, cocktail culture, the kind of speakeasy, the nouveau, the secret bars, the nouveau speakeasies, the secret bars in New York were starting to also come about. Cigar bars became a thing. And then it just all exploded. It just, cigars have been on this slow, and this trajectory downward versus all of a sudden they were everywhere. They were on TV shows. They were in movies. There was some every city. It really was truly unbelievable. And it is impossible. So much, kind of like the tequila boom of a couple of years ago, about a decade ago. There wasn't enough tobacco. They couldn't grow it quick enough. It was just like they didn't have enough agave to fulfill the orders. I mean, crazy. Nobody expects a boom like that, right? So it's everywhere. It's omnipresent. And then, it's just ubiquitous to culture at that time. Every bar allows cigar smoking. And then you kind of had peaks and valleys since then. And part of those valleys have been some of the laws that have been anti-smoking laws that have been passed. But, you know, it just kind of is what it is. I need to relight my cigar, and I'm doing all the talking. Ask me another question while I light.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that is because we talked earlier, and you are in a couple of weeks, I guess, celebrating or reaching the milestone of 30 years in the cigar industry. So
yeah,
first of all, yeah, toast to that, but also
cheers to that.
You can really tell with that enormously detailed answer. I did not expect such an enormously, you know, an answer that just really covered so many aspects. Because I don't know, we're obviously way too young to know anything about the cigar boom, but like all the information about it is a little bit vague, but like that is such an incredible insight to sort of every little aspect of, you know, what started. So that's incredible. Do you want to say, by the way, what cigar you're smoking? Because we talked about that before.
So we did talk about Carlito Fuente a little earlier. I am smoking perhaps, although this cigar was blended by his father, perhaps the rarest, if not one of the rarest, Don Carlos's there is. I smoke a lot of the Don Carlos number 2s. This is a Don Carlos Lancero, which is is for people who, I don't like the term unicorn cigars, but if you're going to use it, this is one of them for sure. The Don Carlos Lancero is, and it's just the perfect cigar for this type of thing where you're just articulating and pontificating. And talk about age. I think the sweater I'm wearing is probably older than both of you combined. So it's you know, so yeah. So yeah, that is kind of, and then it just grew. And you know, Smoke Magazine added that, you know, some fuel to that fire, that boom, or some ammunition to the boom and fuel to the fire, if we're going to keep it all, we're going to draw our analogies clearly. And then there were so many things. You really gave rise to the boutique cigars, really came along. Cigars that were very regional, like Padron. Padron was a very regional cigar. And because of the cigar boom, it became a national phenomenon. It's a phenomenon. And now it's global. So, but all those things happened during the boom. And so much more. It was really a remarkable time to be in New York. It was a remarkable time to be in the media industry. It was a remarkable time to be in the cigar industry. It was a confluence of a lot of really great things that all kind of merged together. And what was great, we were talking about the cigar malt from the Dalmore a little bit ago. When we started out, not that you guys sent me a bottle, but you know, whatever. You know, you learn so much about ancillary industries. You learn so much about wine. You learn so much about spirits. You learn so much about cuisine in general, about what pairs well with a particular cigar. You learn about watches, because watch guys have a propensity to be cigar guys, or vice versa, I guess really is the case. Certainly is with me. So yeah, it all just kind of comes together, and that does not bring us anywhere near to today, but we're going to kind of put an ended on that little segment. So there you go. But that's the boom, and that's Smoke. And Smoke went on for the last thing. So I sold my shares in it, and but I stayed friendly, not with my ex-business partners, but with the editorial director, a guy by the name of Ted Hoy. And Ted actually invited me, which was very kind, actually, to do the cover. I only wrote 2 cover stories for Smoke ever. I did the first one with Pierce, and then I did the 10th anniversary issue, and I've been long gone from the magazine since when that came out, but with Andy Garcia, the wonderful actor, Andy Garcia. Right. And so we did a beautiful, was it Greg Gorman? We got another famous photographer to shoot him. I want to say it was Gorman. It's a beautiful portrait of him, and that was it. And that was literally the last thing that I did.
Get us back on track a bit after we had some technical difficulties there.
Please stand by. We're experiencing technical difficulties. Yes.
But you're describing this time period, which sounds absolutely amazing to live in, and so different from it is today. And speaking about the cigar boom and like what came from it. What is something that came during the cigar boom that is no longer here today? Something about the culture maybe in the cigar industry is or
There was a lot of herpes in New York back then. I think we got rid of that.
Really?
Yeah, I know, it's a shame. It's not just for Christmas, it's forever. No, I mean, for a cigar smoker, it was definitely a halcyon kind of time. I mean, it absolutely was. I mean, we are reaping the benefits right here and now. I often say, in spite of all the anti-smoking laws that are across the globe, we are living in the best time to be a cigar smoker, especially for non-Cuban, for Dominican, Nicaraguan, Honduran, Ecuadorian, Mexican cigars. Because there was a real globalization when they were caught with their pants down and they didn't have enough tobacco reserves and they couldn't make enough cigars. All of a sudden, all these other, there were no Ecuadorian, Connecticut shade wrappers being grown back then. That is all, you can trace all that. I know I go from not being particularly serious to very, very serious very quickly. So you got to keep up, kids. These kids today, very short attention span. So, my whole thing is all the things that you see today, all the blends that we're seeing today, the non-Cuban blends. So many of you have, Cameroon wrappers with Nicaraguan and Dominican binder and fillers. You have, and the irony is, of course, only broadleaf is now being grown in Connecticut, where really up to 2000, 2001, the actual Connecticut seed, Connecticut shade wrapper grown in Windsor, Connecticut, in the Connecticut River Valley, was the premier wrapper in the world. And then Davidoff switched to Ecuador and others followed. And so, so much of what happened in the boom, also you had a lot of consolidation of brands. So obviously in the US version, the US market version, La Gloria Cubana used to be an independent brand. Now it's part of General Cigar. So you had mergers and acquisitions. You had all sorts of logistics and operational changes. You also developed all sorts of new strains of tobacco that were blue mold resistant and all sorts of hybrids and all these things can be really, because who was investing in an industry that was on the decline? Once it was on the rise, everyone's like, we've got to answer all these things that have been plaguing our industry forever. And now we have. And so the blends that you are smoking, or the tobacco and the quality control and all those things, although not necessarily always with Cubans. I smoked a Partagas Series P2 today, and I must have stabbed it a dozen times with a toothpick. It just wouldn't draw. I finally gave up on it. But anyway, that happens. But the bottom line is, we are reaping so many benefits of an expansive and moneyed time. I mean, it's like any other industry. In a boom time, people invest in the business, right? And in the industry. So there you have it. So that is the long answer to a relatively short, benign question. And there you go.
I like the positivity. I mean, every time we discuss or we talk to someone about the future, everyone's so grim about it. All these restrictions. You actually say we're living in the best time. That for me, it's good to hear.
It is the best time. And I think people are pushing each other. When you look at some of the bigger brands, whether it's Fuente or Davidoff or the Habanos portfolio, when you look at the packaging and the special editions and limited editions and the regional editions, none of that stuff existed, man. They were just happy to sell product. Wow. They're like, we got shelves and we got cigars on those shelves. How are we going to do, and now we need all these new things. All that innovation was sparked and created during this boom period. And there have been little mini booms. And right now in the United States, we are seeing a huge influx, a huge climb in cigar sales. So it continues. And I think it is remiss of others if they don't mention it, quite honestly. And there's challenges, but as you just drink your scotch, the U.S. also went through prohibition, and that seemed to work out just fine. In the end, you stick around long enough, everything comes full circle. I'm a firm believer in that.
I love that. I love that. You mentioned the influx and increase. I guess I wanted to pivot, not as smoothly as I hope, but I know you smoke a lot of similar ring gauge cigars as I do. I love the Corona Gordas. This is something that we discuss often, but like even just in the few years that we've been smoking, cigar sizes have been increasing and increasing and increasing. I saw Cohiba Blue recently release a 7x70, which is nuts. That was a joke size a few years ago.
Oh no! In my opinion, it's still a joke size. I am.
What are your thoughts on this?
I am a vehement classic Vitola proponent. You know, it is really fun. I remember when the Cohiba Robusto came out. You guys can never imagine how revolutionary that cigar was. I mean, there just weren't cigars, like 48 was it. Like the world stopped at 48. It's like, what's that? Anything above a 48 is crazy. That's crazy talk right there. And now we're talking about 70s. Crazy. You know, it's very, very interesting. Let's take a page, an analogy from the watch world. Watches were traditionally relatively small, 38, 39 millimeter. And then all of a sudden you had these watches that went up to 46, 47, 48 millimeter. Now they're kind of coming back down to between, I'll say 38 and 42. That kind of seems to be the sweet spot. I really hope this trend, I call it the supersizing of cigars. I really hope the supersizing stops. It takes away all the elegance of the cigar. You know, there's a perception that you're getting more bang for your buck, and I suppose that is true. You are getting more tobacco for a certain price, but it loses so much of its nuances. I talk about it on my Instagram feed all the time. You will rarely see me smoke a cigar bigger than a 52 ring gauge. And when I do, 99.99% of the time, I was gifted that cigar. I never, ever buy a cigar that's above that ring gauge. It's just not my jam at all. And I'm not, look, different strokes for different folks. You know, I have guys that come to me and say, I only smoke Cubans. I have guys who come to me and say, I only smoke Davidoff. I only smoke Fuentes. I only smoke Padron. I only smoke this. Whatever floats your boat, but this particular size, which almost every cigar company is guilty of, I think is a terrible abomination. I think it's a terrible trend. But, you know, that's an old guy who's used to more traditional things, but cigars are inherently a tradition. I mean, that's what they are. We're pushing 530 years, right? And really as a true industry, 300. So, you know, it is a traditional thing. I'm not saying you shouldn't push boundaries. We're talking about the unique and expressive and experimental blends.
Of course.
I'm not here to tell somebody that an experimental blend is okay and a size is not. For me personally, it is an issue.
Yeah.
Not an issue, but it's just not my jam, man. It's just,
I know.
and
I mean, that argument that you get more for your money is just like, for me, it's not even valid because you're not buying that cigar, picking the leaves apart and reselling them. It's like the cigar is the enjoyment that you pay for, pretty much.
That's absolutely. It's a moment, as Zeno said so many times. It's a moment. It's a memory. And that's exactly what it is. I just don't. And the other thing that I have 3 picadillos. We might as well touch on them before we continue talking a little about me. Please. One is the supersizing of cigars. That's a big sig. Right there. Second one, and it seems more popular with the Cuban cigar smokers, especially in the UK and whatnot. The little pokey sticks that look like a roach clip from the 70s. Oh yeah,
the daggers. Yeah.
The daggers. Yeah, that's bullshit.
Oh yeah.
If your cigar is that plugged, or you need to smoke it that far down, I understand cigar taxes or tobacco taxes are high. It's just gauche. It's so wrong on so many different levels. So that's another sig. Now, the third one is there is this phrase, and CW and I have talked about it before, that started in the United Kingdom, and that is calling non-Cuban cigars, or specifically Dominican, Nicaraguan, Honduran, and Mexican cigars, New World cigars. Well, this is where I'm going to swear. Last I fucking looked, Cuba right next to the Dominican Republic, also part of the New World. There's so many things wrong with this term. First of all, it's historically inaccurate. It's geographically inaccurate. It's colonialist. It's imperialist. It's condescending in a subtle way. And it's bullshit, because what it's really saying is that Dominican cigars and Nicaraguan cigars, all of a sudden I got really excited, really animated, can't stand on their own. And that's just fucking rubbish. I smoke everything. I mean, and it's just bullshit. And it's just like, it's patronizing. That's the word I was looking for. It's like, oh, there's Cuban and there's everyone else. And it's like saying there's only French and Italian wines, and fuck California and fuck Australia and Spain and Portugal and, Georgia, where they've been making wines way longer than they've been making them in France. The whole term is wrong. So that is Sig's third strikes you're out. That's it. That's my soapbox for the show, kids. That's what you get.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wish we could move past the Cuba versus non-Cuba. I mean, like, you don't talk about that, like you said, with wines, and you're a wine lover. You don't say French or non-French. You speak about every wine region equally.
I think people did before the Judgment of Paris in 1976, when you had Montrachet and Mondavi against all the French wines. And all the other California French wines is what I meant to say. But I mean, it's still a thing. It was interesting growing up in California, as I did, being a native Angelino. When I moved to New York, where my father was originally from, it was very interesting because it was very much all about French wines, which I knew very little about. But I grew up with California wines, which I knew a great deal about. If you look at my wine cellar now, it's kind of like my cigar humidor, quite honestly. I have French, I have Oregon. I love Oregon Pinot Noirs. They're very different than Burgundies, but they are valid in so many different ways. So it's my humidor and my wine cellar are reflective of this very kind of international or global approach of smoking and drinking everything one can. There was even for a very long time, a very innovative, it's still out there, it's lesser known. There is an American, California-made alembic brandy called Germain Robin. And Germain Robin actually started making the closest thing to cognac one can find in the United States, but they were doing it with Pinot Noir grapes. Fascinating and delicious. And so I think if you have a more expansive mind and you're like, okay, is it a cognac? There's a very old saying, I don't want to get it wrong. All cognacs are brandies, but not all brandies are cognacs. And that is very, very true. Obviously, in Armagnac and Spanish brandies are not. But if you keep an open mind, you can really find those gems that are out there. And something like Germain Robin, their XO, is still fantastic juice. And just as expensive as a cognac, and rightfully so. So there you go.
Fantastic. Good recommendation.
I'm good like that. It's kind of what I do for a living. All right, ask me another question. I'll have another.
Yeah, let's go back to Mr. Sig himself.
Did you have something, Carl, on your mind?
Yeah, no, I wanted to move more recent. I mean, we've taken so much of your time already. We wanted to ask a couple questions on some recent stuff you've been doing, and then if there's a little time, ask some follower questions, because there's a bunch of followers who wanted to ask you some stuff as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we wanted to just hear a little bit of the process, because Asolin and the Impossible Collection of Cigars, that book that you made, or work of art, you could also call it. I mean, really, it looks incredible.
Thank you.
How did you go about making that, and what was the process like? Because it seems like such a huge work of art.
It is, and it was. I'll go back. Well, we were skipping over a couple of things, and I'll just kind of dig into that. So after Smoke and Drink magazine, I kind of bebopped around the cigar industry a little while. I went back and I worked for Davidoff in New York, and I became creative director of General Cigar Company. And then I launched a second cigar magazine, which was shorter lived, but actually kind of more the magazine I had always envisioned. It was what Cigar Aficionado originally was. It was just essentially 100% cigars, or had a direct correlation to cigars. So if we wrote about a watch, it was like the Zenith Habanos or Fuente Hublot
Mhm.
partnerships. It was very, very
Wow,
cigar
okay.
centric.
Cool.
And so we did the cigar report, and then the financial crisis in
All right.
08, we stopped in 09. So then I worked for Nat Sherman, which was great. While in between those things, I was working with Playboy, and I wrote the Playboy Book of Cigars, which was my first cigar
Right.
book. And the Playboy Book of Cigars, at that time, I'm sure it's been eclipsed now by Nick Falks and Rick Hacker's books. At that time was the best-selling cigar book in the world,
Wow.
mostly because Altadas USA, the then licensee of Playboy Cigars, bought tens of thousands of copies. And one Christmas, it was like a gift with purchase. Buy 2 boxes of Playboy cigars and get this beautiful book
Oh,
for free.
nice.
So yeah, so it was really out there. The book that wound up being a standalone book is very different than the gift with purchase book. It's got a different title. It's got a different cover. It's also 32 pages longer, something like that. So it's longer. It's a different book. But that book kind of kept me in the cigar realm for a long time. But then I kind of stopped. And actually, I started focusing, not because I wanted to, but I just couldn't figure out the next thing to do. I'd done a lot of stuff in cigar media. I'd launched 2 magazines. I had done a book. I did a radio show while I was doing a Spoke magazine called Lighten Up Radio, and that was fun. So I felt I had kind of done everything, and I'd always been a watch collector as well as a cigar smoker, and I really shifted to the watch world for a very long time. And this is how we get to the Impossible collection of cigars. With Sig, like trends, it all comes full circle eventually. That is the theme of this interview.
Amazing.
So I wrote a book. I edited and co-authored a book on Boulevard watches, not to be mistaken with Boulevard cigars. And Boulevard watches is a true American iconic. Many of them were made in Switzerland, but it's an American brand and it's a very American tale. And I loved it. And that was my first book with the Azulines, who I'd actually known for a very long time. For our listening audience, I just took a sip of iced tea because I was parched. So we did the Boulevard book. It was very, very successful. And I was having a meeting with Prosper Azuline, the co-founder of Azuline Books. And he asked me what I wanted to do next. And I said, well, I was a big fan, speaking of Nicholas Falks, of Nick Falks' Impossible Collection of Watches, which is part of, so this is a whole series of books. There's the Impossible Collection of wine, of American wine, of cars, of watches, of motorcycles, of art. And I said, Prosper, what I really would like to do is the Impossible Collection of cigars. And he's like, Aaron, naturellement, I've had this idea so many times, and I was just waiting for you to ask to write this book for us. It would be such an honor. And I just knew he was full of shit. But I took it anyway, because who doesn't like to be flattered? So that's how it came to be. So I did the Boulevard book. We did the Impossible Collection of Cigars. Right when that wrapped up, I actually did a second watch book for them on Accutron watches, which was a sub-brand of Boulevard, but very much stands on its own. It celebrated its 60th anniversary last year, and the book came out for its 60th anniversary. And Jack Forrester was also the author of that book. Is the editor-in-chief of Houdinki, who some of your followers and listeners may follow as well. So Jackie and I did that book, and I am now working on 2 more books for Azuline. And there you go.
Very
and so,
nice.
yes,
Very
the
exciting.
books that fall within the Ultimate Collection, which the Impossible Collection of series is part of, are much... I mean, there's real content there. I mean, it's 20,000 words in that book, but they are objet d'art. I mean, they are real collectors kind of items. Unbelievably, that book, forgetting the special humidor edition, is in its 3rd edition, and then we sold out the humidor edition as well. I have people. Incredible. That was incredible. I have people come up to me and say, I own both editions, and I look at them and I'm like, it's really the same book. I don't know why you do, because the humidor edition was really expensive. I mean, I have a copy, but they gave me mine.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, my own mother wouldn't pay $2,000. It was more. It was like 2,500 US. It was like 2,000 euros. So I mean, my own mom wouldn't pay that for one of my books. So I don't expect others, but it did well, and I'm really excited about the next books coming out, which I absolutely can't talk about. So you can't ask me about.
Of course. We saw one of the
Won't
books
pressure you
made
on
them.
that one.
One made its way here to Sweden to AJ of Three Amigos. I saw that, which was really cool.
Yeah, I think that's the only one there. That was really complicated. I'll tell you a quick little side story. So AJ reaches out to me via Instagram. That's Sig Cigar at Instagram.
Oh yeah.
So
we'll have all the links.
No, I'm just so AJ reaches out to me, DMs me. I didn't know him. Great, lovely guy. And he says, I want a copy of the book, but I want you to sign it. I'm like, you have no idea how big these books are and how complicated the request is. I'm like, if I'm in an Azuline store, I will sign whatever except for the receipt. So just don't hand me the tab and I'm good.
Yeah.
So he said, but I really, really want it. He's like, I'll send you some cigar. I'm like, I'm like, that's generous, but it's not my motivation here. I'm like, okay. He has to pay for it. He has to have Azuline send it to me. I have to unpack it out of its 15 different boxes. I sign it. I have to tape it all back up. I have to send it to you guys via DHL or him. He has to unpack it on and on and on. And I actually truthfully told him after his book, and it's not because I don't want to, it's just so logistically complicated. That will be the last book I ever do that for or with. It's just so... It sounds simple when I'm recounting the story, but really
I can imagine.
Is a big pain in the ass.
Shipping's a hassle.
It's just a lot of like follow up and waiting on it and then reshipping it and dealing with international customs. It's a pain in the ass. So he definitely has the only signed book in Sweden. I don't know if that's the only copy of the book.
That's awesome.
So cheers to AJ.
To
CW and AJ. There you go.
Great names, great abbreviations. Yeah, I actually met AJ in Malmö here, which was really fun. So yeah, AJ, great guy.
Good guy. So so we get to
good
the
at getting a
collection.
signed book from you.
Yes, exactly. Well, if you guys want it, we'll work. So I'd rather just have you guys take get a book and fly me out there. I'd rather do that any day.
Yeah.
So Savior, what's the denomination in Sweden? I don't even know. What do you get? It's not a euro, is it?
No. Crowns, Swedish crowns.
Yeah. Crowns, the Swedish crowns. Well, there you go. So so save your crowns, man. We'll do that. So that's the Impossible Collection of Cigars is it can only be described as my love letter to the cigar industry. I mean, it's and cigars in general, and a lifelong passion. It really was an honor and a privilege to do that book, and I don't say those things lightly. It was an incredible experience, and I was very happy. I'm really excited about the new books I have coming out from Azuline on to the next, but that project will always remain one of my favorites and very, very special. I spent about a week in Cuba dealing with Habanos on that book. That was fun because usually when I go to Havana, it's during the festival and everyone's busy and, taking photos and whatnot. And this was just me. And so here's my private tour of the Partagas factory and private tour of the Cohiba factory. And it was really a special experience. And then all the time that I spent with, so the book is 70% Cubans and 30% non-Cubans.
Okay.
There are 100, in all the Impossible Collection books, there are 100 examples of what is, so there are 100 watches, 100 cars, and there are 100 cigars. And when we were writing that book, when we were working on that book, Prosper and I were talking about it. He's like, Aaron, you talk to some of the retailers that have both the Cuban and the non-Cuban. I do not like the non-Cuban, but that is just me, except for Fuente. He loves Fuente, which I really find interesting. He's such a Cuban cigar guy, growing up in Morocco and France, and that makes sense. But most of the Fuentes, except for the Opus X, are pretty light-bodied. So for a diehard Cuban guy, but anyway, he's got a thing for Fuente, and he's like, call some of the retailers and find out what percentage is out there. Okay, I'm like, sure. So I called a bunch of guys, mostly in the UK, but a few guys in Germany as well. And the answer was pretty universal. If you have both Havanas and Dominicans and Nicaraguans on your shelves, it's about 70-30, 75-25.
Okay.
And so we went with 70-30. So 30 of the cigars in the book are Dominican, Nicaraguan, Canary Island.
All right.
One Mexican, I think. And then the rest are Havanas. So yeah, so that's how that kind of worked. So it represents a global split on consumption. Obviously not in the United States, where that would be pretty much inverse.
Oh,
where you would have, if even that. So there you have that.
Yeah, I guess we're almost up to speed now. With you talking about how you were working on those two books, but there's more stuff that's coming out. This is what we wanted to hear, because this is what's really happening right now. Is
what's happening right now?
The whole cigarware thing.
Cigarware.
Which you're not wearing right now.
That's going on.
No, I'm wearing, because it's cold in this room, so I'm wearing a really heavy cashmere
80-year-old sweater instead.
I checked, and I hadn't received any message from DHL either about the ship. You sending us the
right? Yeah. Fair enough. Touche. So I have a lot of expensive hobbies, according to my wife, and bespoke clothes are one of them. And one of my best friends, and actually the third man, who happens to be, we've touched on all of them, which I don't think I ever had before. So the Impossible Collection of Cigars is dedicated to three men who have been instrumental in kind of my cigar world life. One is George Brightman, who we talked about, who was the original, I think, associate publisher, director of new business. He had a title like that at Cigar Aficionado. So George leaves Davidoff and goes to work for Marvin for many years, for like 12, 13 years. Mr. Sahakian, Edward. And then the last one is a guy by the name of Max, and Max Girambelli is a famous bespoke tailor.
Cool.
And he is a dedicated cigar guy as well. And he and I were talking about stuff. And he came up with the original concept of cigarware. Cigarware is really kind of two different things. So the core collection, which Max created, is essentially made to order cigar wear. It's shirts. There'll be trousers as well, but there's a field jacket, which can also be a vest. There's a shirt, which can be long or short sleeve, and then there'll be trousers that will come in Bermuda shorts and long pants, which I don't think I've talked about. So you've got an exclusive.
Wow.
And then and then I've done some accessories, and the candle, the cigarware candle, which is a custom fragrance that I worked with a fragrance house here in New York.
Cool.
It's done well. The candle is done okay. The clothes are kind of interesting. I'm actually traveling down to the Dominican Republic in a couple of weeks, so I will take cigarware on the road, as it were. So cigarware is cool. It's a nice little sideline, a hobby that will hopefully pay for itself. But it's been a fun project to do with Max, and it's always fun to work with friends, and that's it. Sure. So, cigarware is fun. It has its separate little Instagram account, but mostly I seem to be promoting it on my primary account. But yeah, it's been a good time, and it was fun. It started out really kind of as a pandemic project. Everybody was just kind of locked up, and Max and I were having a virtual cigar hangout. I hate the word herf. That would be the fourth thing if Aaron Sigmond would. Okay. It goes with the, oh man, the word, it sounds like herd. We're not fucking cattle. It's like, I just hate the word herd, which is another UK term. I don't think, for people who originated my language, the reality is I don't think they're doing justice to this industry. Oh, wow. Anyway, I'm picking on the Brits today. Usually I do nothing but be a teetotaling Anglophile, so fuck them this time. Although I love it. So yeah, herf, terrible expression. So he and I were having basically a Zoom cigar together, and he's like, Aaron, no, I won't do the accents again. So
it's like he's in this room, really.
So, right, exactly. So we just started talking about cigarware, and he sent me a prototype of the shirt, and he obviously has all my sizes. So it fit me, and that's how it all came to be. So that's cigarware. It's probably not terribly interesting to your listenership, but it is a fun project for me. So there you go.
I think it's cool. I mean, like the cat, I mean, it's not, I think you're playing it down a little more than like, because like it is kind of, there are unique things about it, like the pocket with the cigar holder. That's really kind of something I've never seen before.
It is. So we're in the process of actually patenting that. It's a patent pending thing. Yeah. So the core collection cigar shell pocket is completely a proprietary design, and that's all Max. I mean, it is basically, I mean, it's engineering, but with a soft leather and fabric material. I mean, it's really, it's really kind of amazing. I mean, yeah, I'm downplaying it just because I just don't know what to say about it beyond that. It's there. It's been you know, year and a half. We worked on the project. We launched it in the fall. The pocket is amazing, and it's not a cigar case as you think about it. It has rigidity. If you're doing cartwheels with cigars, your cigars will be ruined. If you're just going out for an evening, you know, my whole thing is I always want to carry cigars on me, but unless you carry, you know, a backpack, a rucksack, as you guys probably would call it, a backpack or a messenger bag or a, you know, a merce we have over here, the kind of man purses, unless you know, and you just have, so when I have Max make my suits, there are always all these secret little pockets for cigars. Wow. So, and sometimes he'll use leather on the inside of those pockets. And that was kind of how this this technical fabric kind of engineering came to be. But the fabrics that he uses for cigar wear for the core collection are the same. Everything's made in Italy. Everything's awesome. Made to order. Everything's made in Italy. It's the very best fabrics. You know, you can't get better. So it's really an exceptional project and unique. I mean, I like special things. The Impossible collection of cigars was special and unique. The cigar wear is also special and unique. So yeah, it's been fun, but it's all due to Max, and he's a great guy.
If you do go to the DR, you should really get Carlito Fuente one, because he has cigars in his pockets all the time, and I'm sure those feet are getting cracked if he doesn't have the.
Funny enough, I also signed an NDA for this, but the odds, if you watch my Instagram, I guess the week of November 29th, you will see why I'm down there, and that may very well happen. So we'll stand by for that.
Well, yeah, guys, check out his Instagram. I mean, this will be out before, so yeah, 29th. Keep that in mind, and we will link all the cigar wear stuff. And I mean, because it's kind of visual what we're describing, so you kind of need to check it out. It's not the best for a podcast, but check out the stuff in the description, of course.
Right.
Yeah. Let's if you have time, just for like one or two follower questions. Because there's one really, Lad, you can start with the one that we wrote down, because I think there's something that we wanted to ask a little bit more about, a specific company that you mentioned. Go ahead, Lad.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. So this was from the Discord from Aramis, who wrote, what is the best Hugh Hefner or Playboy Mansion story that you have? And
we can't record this podcast without Playboy.
No, yeah, exactly. And I already feel like this answer might go on another hour or something, but we're here for it. So.
You know, I'll tell you an unexpected. You know, I mean, you guys use the word legend a lot, and it's kind of. I mean, whatever's above that, Hugh Hefner is many levels above.
Fair.
I mean, a legendary icon. I mean, and iconoclast for that matter. Working with Hef is. I mean, it was surreal to say the least. So interestingly enough, when I worked for the magazine, Hef still read every article and every word that went in that book. I mean, he was in his 70s then, I guess. And he absolutely was hands-on editing the Playboy book of cigars. So we didn't talk about this, but it's one of my favorite stories. I was having lunch with Leroy Neiman, who actually was an artist who drew all the little black and white female figures for the joke page when Playboy had joke page on the backside of the centerfold. And he started working with Hef, if not the very first issue, the first full year, which is 1954. And they were lifelong friends. They knew each other from Chicago. And Leroy and I were friends because Leroy was a big cigar smoker. As a matter of fact, for a brief moment, he had a limited edition cigar come out in his honor. And I think it was the Playboy. It was the Playboy Don Diego Leroy Neiman selection. I think it was a very long title. But we were having lunch together, and he said, there's a Playboy book of cocktails and hosting and this and that and the other, but I really want to do a cigar book. And I said, this is so many leagues above my pay grade. It's so far on my purview. You're going to have to talk to somebody. And right there at the lunch table, he calls Hef at the mansion and says, I don't know why, no one there ever called me by my nickname or first name. They all call me Sigmond. He's like, I'm having lunch with Sigmond. We're at the Tavern on the Green in Central Park. Not that Hef would have given a fuck, but he told him anyway. And I'm like, I'm having Chardonnay. It's okay. And he's like, I want to do a Playboy cigar book, and I'm going to write the forward, and Sigmund's going to write it. Hef's like, okay. And that's literally how that deal happened. So I get back to the office. Yeah, I get back to the office, and Christopher Napolitano, who was then the editorial director of Playboy, says, what the fuck happened to lunch? I'm like, I had a Cobb salad and 2 Chardonnays. What do you care? He's like, the book. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. In the middle, I was a Chardonnay in. I'm like, in the middle of lunch, Leroy called Hef and said he wanted to do a book, and I guess I'm doing a book. Apparently, the whole office was in a dither over this. So that is one. But the story I have that's most memorable about Hef, and I did go to the mansion to answer your guys' question, for the launch of the Playboy by Don Diego cigar. But I wrote an article, part of which takes place in Havana, for Playboy. And that's when I had offices in the Playboy offices, which were then in the Crown Building in New York on 5th Avenue and 57th Street. Beautiful offices surrounded by Warhols, of the Playboy rabbit head and all sorts of stuff. And it was great. We got to redesign the rabbit head for the book with the cigar, which nobody had messed with that logo forever. And we redesigned the logo. It was an amazing project from soup to nuts. And when Hef called you personally, he didn't really call you. He had an assistant, Mary, who was featured on TV shows, so people in America might know who she was. She's since passed, like Hef. She was his assistant for 30 years, 40 years, forever. So Mary would call from the mansion. She wouldn't say hello. There were no pleasantries. She would just say, you pick up your phone, you'd see it. We would say mansion. And so you pick up the phone, and she would just say, hold for Hef. Not, hi, Mary, just hold for Hef. And Hef had read this article that I wrote, and it had a very kind of Hunter S. Thompson quality to it. It was definitely very gonzo journalism. And Hef says, Sigmond, if you want to write this shit, you go over to Jan Winter's office and go write it for Rolling Stone. We don't write stuff like this for Playboy. And he hung up. And that was the end of that article. It was like 5,000 words. I got paid for it, but we killed the whole article, and I started from scratch. And it was just this kind of very, what they call a service piece. It was just a really kind of traveling to Havana 101 kind of piece. And it was like getting high, getting fucked up on the plane, getting drunk, landing. He's just like, and he's like, this is Rolling Stone shit. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that's my favorite. My favorite Hef story is definitely not the happiest story, but it's just, I mean,
that's cool.
If you're going to get told, go fuck yourself by somebody, better from Hugh Hefner than most people. So that's my favorite Hef story, my personal one anyway. So there you go.
Guys are happy with that answer. I mean, we've gone for so long.
Shit. I mean, he's dead. I can't have any more.
If not, fuck off.
I mean, what are we gonna do? I can't dig him up. Hef, they need another story for this podcast. What do you got?
All right, I guess we'll end with one last one from a follower because we've gone on for so long. This was just that. Because you said you smoke everything, right? So we're gonna nail you with probably the most over-asked for question ever.
My crack days are behind me, but pretty much everything.
Yeah, you're settling into the the more finer things in life.
For the record,
we got that.
No crack.
Sir_ip asks, this is just one. I'm also curious about this. If you have a favorite cigar, if you had to choose one, because you've smoked so many. From unicorns, like you love to call them, to just everyday stuff.
Well, I don't like to call them. That's one of those what people call them. So
I know.
When you get old, you'll understand. What is it with I mean, I will segue. I will answer your question. Do you know who James Coburn is? Talking about legendary actors, and if you don't, because you guys are young, just Google him. James Coburn, very famous actor, very famous, truly a cigar legend. He was a big cigar guy, and
right.
He didn't like. I don't care, but he didn't like female cigar smokers. I was once out having a cigar with him, and he was like, "What is this crap with women smoking cigars?" And I'm like, "Well, in other parts of the world, I mean, women smoke cigars a lot." He's like, "I don't like it." He's like, "It's a guy thing." So when you get older, now I don't give a shit about that. When you get older, certain terms and certain things, it doesn't play well. So, Perth, Unicorn, and New World. These are verboten
the ones
for
to
me.
avoid.
Stay away from.
I like to think that every cigar is really about the moment. We talked about that a little bit earlier in the podcast.
Agreed.
So when you have a favorite, that denotes that every moment with that particular cigar is special, and that's not always the case. My favorite cigars are really about my favorite memories and my favorite moments. So it's not the same. There are cigars I smoke regularly and have over the course of my cigar smoking life, for lack of a better description. When I was in London, when I lived in London, which is the first time I guess I actually ever smoked a regular cigar. It was a Davidoff number 2. I write a lot about the Davidoff number 2. It was really a very seminal cigar for me as a Cuban cigar, as a Dominican cigar, and the Davidoff number 2 with the 702 wrapper hybrid from Ecuador is now also a seminal cigar in my life. So that's a cigar I smoke on a relatively regular basis. At one point in time, it's probably my only morning cigar. I've smoked, it's one of the reasons I'm smoking this cigar. I smoke a fair amount of Don Carlos number 2s if I'm smoking non-Cuban. As far as Dominican cigars, I pretty much only smoke Fuente and Davidoff. It just seems to be. I was on the team that launched the Special R, so I have a place in my heart for the Special R. But that's a very personal thing. Yeah. There's another age joke to be made. The Special R, that's been around for 30 years, and it has, but it's still a great stick. As far as Cuban cigars go, what I smoke, what's on my Instagram is really what I smoke, guys. It's I hate to keep on referring to that feed, but I smoke a lot of off brands. I mean, Bulova is obviously my very favorite. I smoke more of those than anything else. The Petit Corona from them, a lot,
which I love.
A lot of Juan Lopez's. And, one of the reasons I smoke a lot of what I would call, boutique brands from the Havana's portfolio is the likelihood of them being counterfeited is non-existent. Nobody's going to knock off a Juan Lopez number 1 or 2. Where when you're smoking a Cohiba or a Monte Cristo or a Romeo y Julieta, the fact of the matter is, you just, depending on the retailer you bought it from, but you don't always know. I've heard stories about people getting counterfeits in Havana. So, it just kind of, I don't know. I smoke when they were more plentiful, and I like the size selection better. I smoked a lot of La Gloria Cubanas. Hoy de Monterrey Epicures. It seems like I smoke less Epis when I look at my feed, but I don't photograph everything I smoke. And I'm still a huge Epi fan. I love that range within that line. So what you see is what I smoke, but it's just of the Cubans, Boulevard is definitely. I mean, I smoke it several a week for sure. I go through more of those than anything else, I suppose. So there you go.
Wow. Well, yeah. I think we'll call it there. I mean, Mr. and Sigmond, or Sigmund as the Playboy guys have called it. We can't thank you enough.
Hey, it's a pleasure.
No, it's almost as if you've done this kind of thing before. It went that well. So
maybe once or twice.
Yeah, honestly, you were such a great guest and had a lot of great insights to say, and also a lot of things, good stories, and just very entertaining.
One could say they could fill a book and have. I sometimes think about doing not necessarily a second edition of the Playboy Book of Cigars, but something kind of similar with more stories, I suppose, anecdotal stories. I can't thank you guys enough for taking the time to listen to me jabber on and on and on. And of course, your listeners as well. Ruben CW, as you will forever now be called. It's really been a pleasure, and I can't thank you guys enough. So there you go.
Yeah, thank you so much. Check them out in the description, guys.